First time I really took a good look at Jupiter through a telescope myself at home, my brain melted a little bit. It was one of those where you see something and you go, oh, yeah, no, that's what Jupiter looks like. I've seen pictures. Yeah, that's Jupiter. But then you have to connect your brain to what you're really looking at.
Welcome to Wildly Unplug, sharing stories of nature, conservation, and creativity. Discover what develops when you unplug and step outdoors.
Mark, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So we're going to dive right in because I am excited to talk about your book, Isaac and the Sky. It blends something massive, the universe, with something
Yes.
deeply personal, grief. How do you think that looking at something so vast as space can help us process something as intimate as grief?
I think, there's a few ways, and it kind of depends on the person, but I think, perspective is always helpful. But I also think more importantly, just at least for this character, and I think for myself and some others I know, processing is also about kind of finding yourself and what's important to you and kind of recentering. And it may seem counterintuitive to think you should look millions of light years away to find yourself. But I think just if you're doing that, you are taking time for you. You are doing something you want to do. You are finding things that interest you, and it doesn't matter if there's people around you. It doesn't matter what anyone else is saying around you. That time to handle things yourself in the way you want to is important, whatever that way is. And for this character, it was looking at the night sky, and I think for me, it has often been that thing too.
So we might be touching a little bit on your background with this next question based on what you just said. So reading the summary of the book, it sounds really fascinating and kind of
Good.
a little bit scary. How did you come up with the idea for Isaac's background story and then it leading him to find the ninth planet?
Yeah, so they came from two completely different places, which is how most of my books work. I tend to come up with characters and their backstories separately, and I kind of fill notebooks with characters I would like to write about. And then I kind of come up with stories and adventures, plots almost separately a lot of times. And then sometimes I just kind of marry the two together and figure out, well, what would a good, I had Isaac already developed in my head, and I was actively looking for a story for him. I knew his past and kind of where he was in the present, but I needed a vehicle to explore where he was going. So Isaac came to me like almost all, far majority of my stories come from something where I had a dream about it. And I woke up in the morning with usually, because dreams, they'll fade out within a few seconds of waking up. I'll have, maybe an image that's kind of in my head. And for Isaac, I had this image in my head that is kind of the key image to start the book, which is that he's famous for this photograph that's taken of him the night his mom was killed. And he's a little kid, and he's being led from his home by police to safety, and he's got his dog with him. And I had a dream, and I woke up, and all that was left was this photograph picture of this kid, sprayed in police lights with his dog, all sad. And I just kind of leaned over to a notebook that I had on, my nightstands. Okay, well, what was that? Who was that? Why was that? What was that all about? And that formed the very basis. So from there, the dream that I remember, I don't think any of it was covered. Any of the details were covered. I was just left with the picture, but that's what I built around it. That's where I took that from. The story, I was a telescope volunteer at the Adler Planetarium in Chicago, and I would volunteer and teach people about telescopes and help run the observatory. And I was there one day watching one of their sky shows, and the show was about a pair of astronomers who have a theory of there being a ninth planet in our solar system, a huge planet. They have tons of circumstantial evidence that something large is out there and whereabouts it might be, what the orbit of it might be. And the show was about their search. And it was fascinating, and I really loved the show, but it was like two astronomers with PhDs on top of PhDs, with observatories on mountaintops, with assistance, with funding, with everything you could ever need to try to make this search, try to find this planet. They haven't found it yet. And after I saw the show, I came out on the front steps of the planetarium and I was just kind of looking toward the parking lot, trying to figure out where I parked my car. And I just thought, what if they haven't found it. What if some kid just accidentally found it with no particular interest, no high-powered telescope, no observatory, no funding, and no intent. They weren't looking for it at all. What if some kid just accidentally found it? What would happen? And I thought that was an interesting idea, and I started walking to my car, and by the time I had gotten to my car, I had attached Isaac to the story. I thought Isaac needs to find something that would redefine him. He is painted in his community and all over as one very particular person based on his past. So he needs to find something new, but also he needs to be torn by what he's found because there's nothing more dangerous to him than the discovery of this planet. Because discovery of this planet would be worldwide news, and that's the last thing he needs or wants. He needs something, but he definitely doesn't need that. That's not what he needs. So I wanted to give him something extremely dangerous to find, and this is the most dangerous thing I could come up with. Was he has worldwide news in his back pocket, and he doesn't know what to do with it, if anything. And I got to my car and I sat down and I pulled out a notebook really fast and I just scribbled. I have plenty of story ideas, and I think they're the greatest story idea ever. And a day later, I'm like, no, that's nothing. I don't know why I thought that was so cool. But I pulled out a notebook and I wrote down, with his mom's telescope, Isaac sees something no one has ever seen before. And in turn, he hopes the world will see him in a way they've never seen him before. And as soon as I
Wow.
wrote that, I thought, yeah, I have a story. This is a book. This isn't going to be one of these bad ideas that fades within 24 hours. This one's sticking. And by the time I had gotten home, 20-minute ride home, I had most of the story plotted, characters developed, side characters. Like I had the whole thing figured out. It was the rare kind of lightning bolt story idea. So
That's really neat. I'm very glad that you said you got the idea through a dream because I'm not a writer and I'm 100 pages into writing a novel that the idea
then
came to
you're a
me.
writer.
Well,
You're
but I had this idea while I was listening to a podcast and I was just daydreaming and it felt like a download. I'm like, I don't
yeah.
know where this idea came from. And it's just kind of written itself. And I'm like, well, I got to get it out.
Yeah, well, no, that's how I describe my writing process too, is that I outline very heavily and then I write very fast. So I drafted this book front to back. Obviously, I revised, but the first draft of it took about 26, 27 days front to back. But I outlined very heavily before I ever started writing it, and I always do that. So I always think of it as once I have it outlined, I'm not really drafting, I'm just taking dictation. Like it's already there, it exists, it's all up here in its perfect form. I just have to write down what's already there. So I often say that I don't write first drafts, I write second drafts because I spend so much time outlining that all I'm doing is just I finish a book as fast as my fingers will type. There's not a lot of time spent searching for where to go next. I have that all planned out in great
Nice.
detail.
Yeah, I've got an outline too, and it kind of feels as I'm writing, I'm just kind of putting in the puzzle pieces of something I've already kind of got the structure for.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I'm learning stuff. And I love that his girlfriend or soon-to-be girlfriend has this habit of breaking into houses. And I can be pretty literal, and it's hard for me to get metaphors sometimes. Is this kind of like a metaphor for her breaking down Isaac's walls, or is this like spoilers?
So it definitely becomes kind of a metaphor for, where I'm showcasing someone who has the ability to get places they're not supposed to go. So no one is supposed to get to Isaac. So there is certainly, that is part of it. But mostly for her, when I was developing her character, it wasn't so much, it was a little bit about the metaphor to Isaac, but more than that, it was about her just being an unsettled person and wanting things to be grounded in her world and kind of looking fondly at people who had that kind of a grounded existence. So she didn't want to go places to steal. She wanted to go places to do normal things. She felt comforted by family photos on the walls, even though they're not hers. She felt comfortable and comforted by playing through someone's Netflix, prompts, even though they weren't hers. She just wanted to feel like she could go home in the evening and everything was perfectly normal and the family was normal and everything was right and fine. And she didn't get that at her home, so she found others to get it though.
It's interesting. You talk about being grounded in a book that's all about
About space,
space.
yes. Yes.
Well, and about that, do you think of space as, because I talk all about nature on this program, is space an extension of nature, or do you think of that as something completely different?
I mean, it is. It's untouched, largely untouched nature, with the exception of where we've crashed, landed some rovers and things on Mars and around the moon. It's all untouched nature, and it's all mostly unexplored nature. Most people, when you say nature, will think of what's around them. And so there's nature here, and then there's astronomy. I mean, I think it's the same, but also kind of the best place to experience space as a part of nature is out in grounded nature. So, if you're able to get away from the city, if you get into the woods, even if you're not able to get away from a city, but you're at least able to get into a park somewhere where there isn't a street light every 50 feet, and be able to get a slightly darker sky to see what is up above, it takes Earth's nature to better explore the nature up above. It's best explored that way. So, yeah. So even with this book, the character didn't find themselves a park, but they found themselves, a perch somewhere to get above the streetlights, somewhere where only it was him and treetops and what was in the sky. So yeah, and it's like my personal, like I don't go hiking a lot. I don't, maybe as a kid I did more things in nature, but now when I experience nature, it's lugging a telescope with me or having an event where I'm looking at the sky. So it's people meeting in nature to look up as opposed to just all around.
You brought up streetlights, and that made me think of blackout areas. How can we educate people? Because it's, turning off our lights at night is great for animals that are migrating, nesting sea turtles, for us to see space. What can you tell people about our light pollution?
Yeah, and I think you can hit it from two ways because there's a certain segment of people that if you talk about light pollution, they are just naturally interested. They're into nature. They're into the environment. They're into being energy efficient. They are predisposed to liking a conversation about light pollution and how to go about it. And if you say, hey, we're going to have this meeting at town hall about light pollution, they'll show up at it. They might not know a lot about it, but generally speaking, that is their interest. They're interested in the environment and nature and whatever they can figure out to do to help that. And I always point that, in the Chicago area, if you look up at the night sky, you can see, maybe 24 points of light in the sky. Whereas if you were somewhere else, people look at images online of the Milky Way galaxy going across, a mountain range. Well, that's not real. No, that is real. That's what you would see if we weren't doing this to ourselves. And some people get excited about that. And, they look at a planet through my telescope and they ask, how do you get a sharper view? Is it a bigger telescope? Yeah, I mean, a bigger telescope can help. But honestly, in an area like this, a bigger telescope isn't going to help because at this point, you're just collecting more pixels. And that means you're collecting more light polluted pixels at the same time. It's not necessarily any better. But then there's a segment of people who aren't predisposed to caring one way or the other. Like they may not be against nature, but they're just not, they don't participate in environmental movements. They're not part of that stuff. They don't feel like it's part of their world. And you can get to those people in a more logical and even economic way is to say, if you have a round light bulb and you turn it on in your ceiling, half of the light and thus half of your bill is lighting the ceiling. And if you have a street light outside, half of the light, and it's circular, half of the light isn't helping anyone. It's just going up. It's not doing anything. Why would we waste half of it? So if you have lights in cities that are reflected down and only shine down, I've seen light installations where there are mirrors, like in ceilings, where regular light bulbs are put into ceilings, but the ceiling has a mirror texture around the fixture, so the light is reflected up and then comes right back down. So you're getting the full wattage instead of just half of it. If you talk to people that way about it, they can understand it and think, oh, well, that sounds like that makes sense. Yeah. Why would you have a round bulb in a ceiling? You don't need to light half of it. That doesn't make any sense. So some people you can get at that way. And I think that's the important thing about it is things in terms of light pollution, like a lot of environmental things, are just plain logical. It's not like you'd have to just be against the environment. You just have to be shut off to it to not listen to the reason of it. Why would you light? Why would you have a bulb and pay for it to light something you don't need to light? What is the point of that? And anyone who's logical or reasonable is going to get that, whether they care about the environment or not.
That's a really good points. Thank you.
Sure.
So I did want to ask, because you talked about Planet Nine, and I used to know exactly how many planets there were, and there was the whole like somebody was making brownies, that whole acronym to remember that, and then all of a sudden Pluto is not a planet and it's kind of a planet. Can you explain all that?
Yeah, so there are 8 planets in our solar system, of which we're one. 8 planets and 1 star. Pluto is a dwarf planet, does not register as a full-on planet. There is an organization, a global organization, that comes up with criteria by which to determine these things. And if you don't like the organization, then you say there's 9 planets and you should just ignore them. But the group that is empowered with this type of thing, they have these 3 very deep, they're general criterias, but then, well, obviously you can imagine a lot of detail underneath. And Pluto matches, I think they match 2 of the 3 criteria, but not the 3rd. So they were downgraded. It was downgraded. And part of it is that at the time it was discovered, it was kind of discovered on its own out there that, oh, we found this other thing really far out there. Since we've gotten better at observing and exploring that part of space, we've learned that there are a lot of other things kind of like Pluto all out in that area. So sometimes I'll go to a classroom and joke with kids who will, I don't know why kids are concerned about it, because little kids are always concerned about Pluto. And I don't understand the concern with Pluto for the little kids, because they didn't grow up with Pluto being a planet. So I'm not really sure why, like, I get someone my age maybe being grumpy about it, but feeling sorry for Pluto. But kids these days, somehow, every time I go to a classroom, I get asked. No, I don't get asked. I get a complaint. I get a registered complaint about Pluto not being a planet. And then I always have to point out, say, if we include Pluto, so you had to memorize the planets, right? So yeah, okay. So you had to memorize 8. Yeah, but really 9. Okay, fine. So really 9. Well, was that easy or hard? Well, 9's kind of a lot to remember. Okay, cool. So if we include Pluto, there's like hundreds of other things you're going to have to include too. If you let Pluto in, do you want to have to memorize 400 planets? Or no, we don't want that. Okay, cool. So there's 8 planets in our solar system. Deal with it. That's how it is. So.
Okay, that's fair. And then I went to an observatory, I think it was last year or the year before, and we could still see Saturn's rings. Saturn?
Yeah.
Can you still see the rings, or is it at that angle where you can't see them right now?
No, you can still see them. I haven't looked at Saturn myself personally this calendar year, I don't think. But yeah, you can see them. Yeah. I love the different positions they take. You get kind of the profile shot of them where it's really thin, and then you get where it's kind of laid out flat and you can see it all the way around. But yeah, you can definitely get a good look with it. Even a regular backyard telescope, you're going to get a look at Saturn's rings. Even in a light polluted area, if you're in a city, Saturn is a great thing to look at. It's very cool. I also recommend looking at Jupiter. I think Jupiter is amazing to look at. Jupiter's kind of my personal favorite to look at.
Ooh, why?
So I like Jupiter not even because of Jupiter. I like Jupiter because when the first time I really took a good look at Jupiter through a telescope myself at home, my brain melted a little bit. It was one of those where you see something and you go, oh yeah, no, that's what Jupiter looks like. I've seen pictures. Yeah, that's Jupiter. But then you have to kind of connect your brain to what you're really looking at. And the moment that I had of this with Jupiter is that when you look at Jupiter, you can typically see, depending on the timing, there are Galilean moons. There are these 4 moons that are large enough and of a good reflective material enough that you can see them pretty well through a telescope. So if you look at Jupiter, you're going to see these little dots off to the side, and they go around Jupiter. So sometimes you'll see 3 or 4, and one kind of goes out a little farther than the other. So you got to go a little bit wider to catch it. But you can see these Galilean moons. And I was looking at Jupiter and I saw the moons there and I thought Jupiter was really cool and I was kind of studying Jupiter itself. And then after 20 minutes of looking, it occurred to me that those four dots were all in different locations than they were when I first started looking. And it's even though I knew they were moons, and even though I knew that they were going around, even though I understood all of that at some part of my brain, the realization that my view of this planet had changed just in the last 20 minutes I was looking at it, like it struck a chord and just kind of registered that I'm watching the orbit of Jupiter's moons like right now. Like I could see four before and now I can only see three because one tucked behind. And that just kind of fascinated me. And it was kind of one of those mind-blowing experiences of looking through a telescope that makes me always love looking at Jupiter for its moons more than for the planet itself.
That's interesting. And not very many people can even say, yeah, I've watched the moon's orbit around and change. That's
Yeah,
really neat.
and I was doing some astrophotography at the time, and I was kind of learning how to take pictures. And you're not actually taking pictures; you're taking exposures with video, and then you compile them. There's a whole process to get a good image of something like that. And I was learning how to do that, and I ended up like by accident with a picture of one of these moons, the shadow of it on the surface of Jupiter. That I had this great picture of Jupiter and then this shadow, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And it was a shadow of one of the moons. And it was just like, oh, see, that's just amazing. Like the moon wasn't even in my shot, but it made its presence known from the shadow. And I thought that was really cool.
That is really neat. And a shadow is something you think of on Earth or something we experience on Earth. And
Yeah,
then to see that out in space, I do want to connect it back to Isaac a little
yeah,
bit because I got off track from the book a little bit talking about space because it's
sure.
so fascinating. But talking about the telescope, there is obviously it's a powerful moment for Isaac to find that telescope amongst his mom's stuff. What
Mm.
do you think it is about tools like that, whether it's a telescope or a sketchbook or a journal, that really help people to connect with something bigger than themselves?
I think it's visceral. I think, I mentioned kind of through the book that, Isaac is young when his mom dies, and his memories they're not full pictures, they're not full videos. Like he doesn't remember going to, a restaurant or a movie or a show or a theme park, and he remembers the whole weekend. And oh, I remember this whole weekend where we went and did this thing and it was great. He has little snippets of his mom in his head. He has the way her hair looked like in the sun at a beach and how she fussed with his shirt. So he has these little snippets, these little thumbnail images that are very real and very visceral to him that remind him that he can remember that thing and kind of remember how her hands felt or maybe what, if she wore a perfume and remember those things. And finding an object like that and being able to see it and maybe touch it and maybe you're in tune to smells or sights or the sound of something, whatever kind of, or the touch, whatever of your senses tends to really pull memory for you. An object can do that. The telescope could have smelled a certain way, felt a certain way, just the look of it or the color, that just reminds him, oh, I hadn't seen this. And kind of instantly is brought back to, I remember that one night we were looking and she was frustrated because she couldn't find this thing. So she threw it in the closet. I remember her doing that. I don't even remember what she was looking for. And I don't remember the rest of the day. And I don't remember the rest of that week or month. But I remember her being frustrated and putting it in the closet. And now here it is in the closet. And I found it. And it's just kind of a lifeline back.
It's really interesting. I talk about that with nature journaling, that it really connects you back to that moment. But you're right. Like it's the same thing with finding a telescope that kind of transports you back to that time and place
Yeah.
and connects you to that. So do you think that a discovery like that, could that be a form of healing, or is it a distraction from pain, or both?
It can be both. I think for Isaac, it was originally kind of it was a little bit of a distraction. I think maybe even a welcome distraction. Like it was something he wasn't really expecting anything super interesting that evening, and then he kind of had something that he found himself thinking about. The next day, he was just kind of thinking about it, and when he went out with the telescope again, he He wasn't really planning on going out 2 nights in a row, but now he had something to kind of look for. So I think he took it as a good distraction. But then then he kind of, when he started to kind of realize that he had maybe found something, then it just all became kind of risky. And I think he starts to kind of wish that maybe he hadn't found it, but it's too fascinating for him to drop. So that's where that real tug of war in the book comes from, in the kind of the middle and back half is, what do I do with this thing that it was fine one night, but now it could be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know quite what to do with it. So, and I think it's kind of funny when he's trying to discover what he's discovered, when he's trying to figure out what it is he's found, it takes a lot of steps for him to figure that out. He has to do observing over and over again. He has to use some other tools. He needs some help, kind of covert help. And the whole time he's kind of trying to figure out what this thing is he found in the sky, he doesn't realize as he's doing it until later in the book that what he's really doing is reconnecting with mom and reconnecting with finding something for himself, for a way for him to handle everything that happened in the past and then find a place for himself in the world and a version of himself that he wants to show people. At the time, he's just looking around and saying, "This is interesting. I should figure this out." Like the character, like myself, is a volunteer at an observatory, so he is interested. So he wants to know what it is, but he doesn't really realize kind of the connection he's making, and that it is opening, it is cracking. These little cracks are opening when he's having some communications with this girl that he doesn't know, Haley, and some better communications and more honest communications with his uncle. And considering what he would do about some other aspects of the past and reporters kind of hounding him, he doesn't really realize at the time that it is the discovery that is giving him a little bit more hope and a little bit more, looking for the word, reason maybe, to let himself try a little harder to find himself. Not try for other people don't deserve any piece of him, but try for his own sake. And in that sense, it's one of those things that, we talk about discovery. It's one of those things where I think I knew that when I was writing the book that he's gonna get obsessed with this discovery, and by the end of the book, he's gonna realize that what he's really doing is finding himself and a place for him to put his trauma and his mom and everything that happened in the past. Similarly, it's funny because I was halfway through the book before I realized I was actually writing this about my mom. I didn't realize this book was about my mom until I was about midway through. And all of a sudden I was like, wait, am I actually writing? Oh, I am, aren't I? Wow, I didn't even occur to me. And so when people read the book, they're like, oh, this is very nice. You wrote this book for your mom. And I'm like, oh, I wrote the back half for her, but the first half I didn't realize what I was doing. I didn't realize until I got into it that's actually what I was doing. Like that I was working through things myself, and Isaac is working through things through his discovery. He doesn't really realize that's what he's doing until much later, just like I didn't really realize it till much later in the writing process.
Wow. So Isaac does it with a telescope and you do it through your
I did it with a
writing.
book. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, Isaac spent years trying to stay invisible, and he's suddenly faced with that spotlight like you're talking about. And I think a lot of people struggle with that moment. They want to be seen, but they also want to hide. Why do you think people struggle with that?
I think, I don't have any kind of grand answer, so any answer I'm going to give is purely me. Like it really, people are going to handle things differently. And I think that's part of one of the points of the book is that you've got to handle things your way. But I think part of the reason people maybe struggle with that is they feel like they're responsible to a persona, or they're responsible to the way they're cast, and they let themselves be cast. Isaac is, to no fault of his own and with no control, he's cast as a character in the lives of everyone in his town. He doesn't know everyone in his town. He doesn't even know everyone on his block. Like any person, normal person, would know every name of every person who lives on their street, let alone their town. But everyone in town knows him, and everyone in the county knows him, and everyone in the state and everyone in the country knows this kid. So he is a character in their worlds. And as he kind of struggles and doesn't really know where he fits, and he feels strange and he feels weird and he feels different, and he doesn't feel like he can do what everyone else is doing, he doesn't feel like he can enjoy things the same way. Part of it is that he's letting himself be typecast. He's letting himself be the character that the town has decided he is instead of being himself. And I think part of the point is for anyone kind of recovering from anything big or small, or just trying, even if they're not recovering from something, but they just want to do something different. They just want to change and just try something new or expand their horizons, whatever it might be. Isaac, for a long time, let himself be cast as a secondary character in everybody else's world. And things only really start to turn around for him when he realizes that he gets to be his own main character. That it's okay for him to be the main character in his own life. He doesn't have to be what everyone else thinks he's supposed to be. He doesn't have to be the sad kid from the photo. He can be the kid who made a discovery. He can be a kid who doesn't like social settings, and there's nothing wrong with that. He can be the kid who's short with people, and that's okay if he needs more time. He can be a kid who keeps things close to the vest. That's okay, as long as he thinks that's okay. That that's what is him, that's okay. But he gets to decide, and he spends way too much time just being somebody else's character and not being his own. And the cracks start to form, and he starts to get better when he starts to kind of put himself first. And I think one of the things I wanted to show in the book that's, I think is important is I've read plenty of books where the quote unquote hero in the book or the main character is just kind of always does everything right. And it's everyone else who are negative forces and doing things wrong, and they're just trying to survive all these negative forces. That's not really how it is, especially if you're struggling with something. I wanted to show him be mean to people. I wanted to show him be short with people. I wanted to show him not trust people. And someone reading it might go, well, why that girl was being perfectly nice to him. Why did he say that was a mean thing to say? Why is he being so mean? Because people are. And it's okay to be that way. And if you're reading that and you think, yeah, man, I remember when I was going through this, I didn't want to talk to anyone. I had that one thing, but he recovers from it. And he recovers from it because he wants to, not because he feels like he's supposed to, not because he feels like that's the image from the picture and then he's supposed to fulfill it for somebody else, but because he honestly eventually wants to be different than he's portrayed. And that's kind of the magic ingredient, is if you want to be different, then you get to try.
That's really powerful. Yeah, like we're not always nice to people, or maybe we think I should have handled that differently, or you're going through something and that's the way you have to interact with the world, and
Yeah.
that's perfectly fine. I think people will really respond and resonate with that, and the fact that we all kind of play this typecast, or in certain settings, but we have the choice to be the main character of our own story.
Yeah.
And people will really resonate with that. Speaking of the
I
main
hope so.
character of your own story, you're a NASA ambassador. We've talked a little bit about that. And like for me, I used to dive with sharks and do dive shows and explain to people.
So just little things like swimming with
things
sharks.
like
Just playing around. Yeah.
No, but people have this fear of sharks, and it was a really fun thing for me to do, to explain to people why sharks aren't as scary as they are, and to see that moment, that light in their eye kind of switch to, oh wow, this is actually a really cool thing.
Yeah.
Science is really complex. Science, but space is really complex. Do you get that same moment where people are like, I don't understand this, to wow, like space is really cool and I want to learn more?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite kind of moments when I work with people. And it's funny, Jaws is my favorite movie, probably, maybe in my top two. I think Jaws is a perfect movie. I think the writing of it is probably, people ask me about writing tips, and I'm like, watch Jaws. Like, you'll learn about writing, just watch Jaws. You want to learn about dialogue, watch Jaws. Like, it's perfect. There's nothing in that movie that's wrong. Everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. And I came out of that movie not afraid of sharks, but afraid of water. It's not the shark's fault. The sharks, that's where they live. It's my fault for going in the water. That's my bad. I'm invading their space. So, but people, when they look at stuff in the sky, to me, it's always kind of a really cool moment when they see something they're not expecting, And when they do that, they instantly get about, someone will come up to a telescope when I'm doing an event. And I'm like, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions about what you're going to see before you look? Like, no, I don't have any questions. And then they look and they see something they're not expecting, or it hits them in a way they're not expecting. And then suddenly all they are is questions. Like they can't ask enough. And one of the most common ones that happens is I remember having a kid look through a telescope once and look up at me and say, "So is this like a live stream? Is this a live stream of Saturn?" And I was like,
I mean, it's not being recorded, but
no. Yes. Next. Bring on the next kid. Let's just get to the next kid. And the thing that I like about the telescope that I'll use will track a planet. If I do an event and I have 100 people there, the telescope will slowly follow the planet across the sky, so I don't have to keep fixing it and lining it back up. But sometimes I'll turn it off to give people a different look. And what's exciting is they'll look at Saturn and they keep looking, just keep looking, keep telling me what you see. And then about 30 seconds later, Saturn's not in their view anymore. It's gone. And like when I can't, it's like it's gone now. What happened? I'm like, well, it's flying really fast, so it's gone. We have to move the telescope. Well, that was like 30 seconds. Well, yeah, it's really far away and it's moving really fast. And a lot of times it's moments like that when kind of a light bulb goes on and they get a sense of scale and distance, and that I'm not just looking at a cool picture of Saturn on the internet. This isn't a live stream. Like I just watched the planet fly by and I'm the only one who saw that because I was the only one only one looking at that moment. No one over my shoulder saw that. Only I saw that. That was mine. And I think those are really cool moments that you can only do by getting your hands on something and doing it. So I don't, anytime I'm doing a science thing or a telescope thing, I want people to touch the telescope and I want them to lean in and I want them to ask questions and I want them to decide they want to look at something else and point it at something else. I want them to do it. I want them to get that visceral reaction to it and feel like they were empowered to see what interested them, and that'll spur questions.
how does one go about becoming a NASA ambassador? Because that sounds really, I don't know that I've ever cussed on my show, but it sounds really.
Yeah, so the process is really simple. Mine was convoluted and weird and funny, but the process is really simple. I mean, there's an online application. I think if I remember right, it's open every September for basically just the month of September. You go online, there's an application form on the website, you fill it out. There's basic information, some questions about your backgrounds and your interests, and some kind of essay style questions, and you fill it out, you submit it, and you hope you get picked. Real simple. It is not a complicated thing to do. Mine was a little odd because I had never even heard of the program. So I was volunteering at the planetarium, and through discussions with the people at the planetarium, I learned about a program called NASA Socials. And NASA Socials they stopped them during COVID, and I think they're bringing it back. They bring in people with social media platforms to attend certain NASA events just in hopes that they will, talk about them and share them on their platforms and get more people interested. And I don't know how I was chosen because I didn't have a platform at all, but maybe the planetarium probably. So I got picked with 20 people to go watch an end of mission for the Cassini mission to Saturn. And I got to go for 3 days out to Pasadena to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and get a behind the scenes for everything. And it was amazing. And I'm not particularly social. I get in a social setting like a party or something, and I'm going to disappear quickly. Like I have no idea how to introduce myself to people I don't know. And I'm clinging to this wall at this like social cocktail party after the event was over. And I'm like forcing myself, like, you're out here. You're never going to be back here. You have to talk to somebody. Please talk to somebody. And it took everything. I looked around the room and I'm like, well, there's two really old gentlemen over there. They look harmless. I'm going to go talk to them. That's my safest bet. So I went and I introduced myself to these two, and they immediately started asking me questions about where I came from and what I do. And I just spilled. I have no social abilities at all. And I just start vomiting out every word I could come up with to try to keep these two interested. And after about 15 minutes of talking about myself, I've learned that one of them was the engineer on the Voyager spacecrafts in the 70s. And the other one was the former head of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And his name is literally on mission control. Like mission control was literally named for him. And I had no idea who I was talking to. So I'm basically talking to two legends, and I'm just like telling them, And I like showing kids telescopes. Oh, you build spacecraft. Sorry. I thought I was super interesting. And so when I found out who they were, I'm like, okay, see, this is why you cling to a wall and you don't talk to people because it just ends badly. This was bad. And after chatting with them, they were like, well, are you in the ambassador program? And I said, I don't know what that is. And they flagged down the person in the room who was actually in charge of the ambassador program. And they said, hey, we got a new person for your ambassador program. And I said, okay, I don't even know what the ambassador program is, but if these two are my references, I will absolutely apply. And they're like, yeah, we're your references. Go ahead and get in it. So I may not be the best ambassador ever, but I have the best references of any ambassador, and I'm certain of it. But that part is true.
I love that your safe people like probably change the whole trajectory of your life.
Completely. The book doesn't exist without that on so many things. But yeah, I just forced myself not to be pinned to a wall, and I chose what I thought were the two safest bets in the room, and they were like the two people who everyone in the room would probably want to talk to. And that's who I introduced
Wow.
myself to. Yeah, by chance, because I don't know what they look like. And as a kind of a joke, they asked me when I became an ambassador. They said, "Well, we need a photo of a headshot for your ID." And every year I get renewed for the program. And they asked me, "Do you want to update your headshot?" And I'm like, "No, I don't want to update my headshot because my headshot is a zoomed in of just my face, but on either side, just off frame, are these two gentlemen. The picture I took with the two of them. So every time I look at my ID, I just laugh. I'm like, I know who's on the other side of this picture right here."
That's awesome. Now, yeah, that being a NASA ambassador led you to do something pretty cool a couple weeks ago. You got to like intro right before my favorite book, which is, I don't know about the movie. It was a good movie. They portrayed it really well, but it is my favorite book.
Project Hail Mary.
How did that go? Was that amazing?
That was very exciting and amazing. I love the book. I love the movie. I've seen it a few times now. And yeah, I always tell people they're like, well, we like The Martian. And I'm like, well, the book, The Martian, doesn't compare to the book Project Hail Mary. Like this Project Hail Mary is a way better book. The movie The Martian is great, but the Project Hail Mary is a book is light years ahead. So yeah, I tied in with I just sent an email to my local movie theater and was like, I would love to do a presentation before one of your showings of Project Hail Mary talking about science fiction versus science reality and how close they're getting and how they play with each other and inspire each other. And they wrote back, and I was really excited. And they were like, "Yeah, let's do this." And they created posters, and they put the funniest thing was they have a big marquee over this main street in my town, and the marquee for Project Hail Mary on one end was my face, and the other end was Ryan Gosling. And they're like, and I kept looking at it going, "Oh, my face is a little bigger than Ryan's on this marquee. This is so weird." And we're both wearing orange shirts in the pro. It was a weird thing to see my face up on this thing next to Ryan Gosling. But it was great because they promoted it and I promoted it as, the movie's going to start at 2. It was the weekend it came out. It was the Sunday that the film came out. And it was like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock showing. So the movie was going to start at 2. And they promoted it on their site, and I promoted it and said, come for a 30-minute discussion with a NASA ambassador to talk about science fiction and science reality. And then at 2 o'clock, we'll start the movie. And the guy told me that he said, we basically sold out the theater. We sold like 101 seats for this showing. And I don't think that from my view, you could only fit a few more people in there. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. And I kept telling myself, yeah, those people bought tickets for the movie. They're going to show up at 1:55 and be like, who's this guy in front? And when are we going to start the movie? So I started my presentation at 1:30 promptly. And the theater was full. Nice. Everyone who bought tickets and came early to see the presentation. So I gave my presentation, which was really cool because it was up on the screen. So like I got to have my laptop screen presented up on the movie screen, like full scale. And then did a Q&A afterwards, and people asked a lot of questions about the book specifically and other sci-fi that I like, and what's true, in the book, and what's made up, and what's close to real. And yeah, people had great questions, and the movie was great, and everyone applauded at the end of the movie. And then I went out in the lobby afterwards and kind of hung out in the lobby, and people stopped and chatted with me in the lobby and had a lot of cool questions. And then 2 weeks after that was Artemis 2 going to the moon. So It's been this nice little run of getting people interested in science fiction and science reality at the same time. So it's been fun.
Nice. Well, my son 3D printed me something that you'd probably appreciate.
Oh, is it yeah.
Yeah, he got it off their website. They have the 3D file. So I just I
I'm
love
gonna
it.
have to get one of those. I mean, that's cool. I need a Rocky though. Like I need a Rocky. So
Rocky's the best.
yeah.
What do you think they did get right in Project Hail Mary versus, reality versus science fiction?
I think the favorite thing that I see, and I think this is something that Andy Weir does particularly well in all of this stuff, and it certainly applies to this, is showing testing and trial and error. I think he's really good at showing that. So science fiction to me, a lot of people get into certain kinds of science fiction and they get fascinated with ships and tech and planets and things like that. And science fiction to me that's interesting is science fiction that holds on to the human element, where the human is still the most important part of the story, not the ship or where they're going. And these problems that for example, in The Martian and then Project Hail Mary, the problems that are faced aren't just solved instantly. The errors are made and you see the process and you hear people, oh, we got to write that down. And you see him in Project Hail Mary writing these notes for himself and doing the math. And I think that's one of the things I like the most about it is it shows the work. It's not just, well, here's the answer. The answer is 12 or whatever. It's no, here you watch them do the math, watch them mess it up and then try again. The first ship they were going to launch explodes because of a calculation error. These happen because humans are involved. And I think that stuff is important to see. And just the teamwork between the two of them, problem solving and filling in the gaps of their knowledge that, one is really smart about this and one is really smart about this. And the other is constantly, that's dumb question. So I appreciate that you have, a mechanic and, an astrobiologist slash chemist, and it took both of them to do it. And I think that's the most important part. The science of the movie isn't that outlandish. And I think that's important too. People ask, well, is the propulsion possible? Well, theoretically, yeah, that propulsion system is possible, but we luckily don't have anything eating our star right now. So we don't have anything to grab to use as propulsion. But theoretically, yes, if you had something that contained that much energy and you ignited it, then yeah, you could use that propulsion. If you put someone in a long-term coma and send them on a spacecraft like that, will they survive? We don't know. That's really hard to figure out. 2 out of 3 didn't. So that's interesting. But I always kind of compare it to really good science fiction to me takes the science reality all the way to the edge of that diving board, gets as far as we know. And then instead of trying to leap 1,000 yards out, they just kind of go for the next few stepping stones out. They try to carry it to the next spot. And I think that's why organizations like NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory have always liked working with Andy Weir and with his movies and his books because he gets the science right. There's a few moments where the science is wrong, and he's identified that he did those mostly intentionally because fiction, and he's allowed to do it. It's fiction. He gets to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But NASA, helps, gets excited about it. NASA had a whole website built about understanding Project Hail Mary and where we are today. And because they like that the effort was put in to make this real.
Nice. I don't know if I missed it during the movie, but I know in the book they talked about Grace and Rocky meeting where they did. Excuse me. And the odds of that, like if they were as a society any dumber, they would have all died off. And if they were smarter,
Right.
They would have already fixed the problem. So they were like,
right.
Both of their civilizations were right at that.
They're in the Goldilocks zone of intelligence.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know that they really explained that in the movie. I need to watch it again. Like the visuals were absolutely stunning.
I don't know that they explain that per se in the film, but I think what is kind of fascinating is they don't show, there's obviously, some advancements like Rocky's ship is amazing, but a human couldn't live on it. And the Hail Mary is amazing, but Rocky couldn't live on it. You could first see Rocky's ship is huge and think, well, they must be way more advanced than us. Look at how big that ship is. Well, who cares how big it is? How does it function? And if you think that he's a mechanic on board, and once they get back to, his planet, kind of the technology they show on his planet isn't all that different. It's applied different ways because it has to serve a different population with different needs. But I mean, they're kind of are at the same level. They're creating similar things. And yeah, I think that is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And where are all the really smart ones that could have just solved it? I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. They were not helpful.
They didn't help the rest of the universe. I thought that was so funny when you first see that ship and it's kind of following Grace's
Yeah,
ship. That was such a funny scene. Now,
yeah.
if you were in Grace's shoes at the end of the movie, this might be spoilers. So for people listening, skip ahead a little bit.
Yep.
What would you do if you were in Grace's shoes at the end of the movie? Would
At
you
the
stay? Would
very
you
end,
go? Mm-hmm.
stay. I'm staying.
Interesting.
I'm staying
Yeah.
because I mean for a few reasons. I'm staying because it's more interesting. Like,
Mm-hmm.
look at where you are. This is pretty interesting. I'm staying because I have a really good friend. I've
Yeah.
made a best friend, and that's great. I'm staying because I'm useful. I mean, he's now a teacher again,
Mm-hmm.
so that's neat. Also, just even from a logistical standpoint, I mean, that's going to be a long ride back home. You know, don't waste those years on this. You spend enough time on a spacecraft by
Yeah.
yourself. So choose to stay. But I would stay.
Cool.
What about you? Are you staying or are you coming back if you're in Grace's shoes? Not your shoes, but Grace's shoes.
I think I would probably stay too, just because by that point, like everybody I would have known they're way older
Yeah.
now, or they're gonna be, and they're or gone.
Yeah.
And I don't do cold very well, and the planet was very cold. They didn't also, I don't think, explain it very well, maybe. That wasn't like Antarctica that they were in at the end of the movie. That
Right.
Earth has cooled down because of the
It has
sun.
cooled. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't do
Yeah.
cold. So if they can
Yeah.
engineer
I
a
don't do
nice
cold at
tropical
all
beach for
either.
me, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. I mean, I was feeling them on San Francisco. Like I do enjoy San Francisco. So I was feeling the vibe on Frisco. But yeah, I don't do cold either. So that's, yeah. Yeah. No, I'm staying.
So what is on the horizon for you? Any projects coming out?
So I have another book that is coming out in September 1st, and this one is a little bit different. This one is a young adult horror novel. So very different from my NASA stuff, but I grew up reading and a student of Stephen King books, and so I've always had a big love for horror, and so I took a shot at I like to write a lot of scary stuff too. So I have a horror book coming out in September, and yeah, I'm just starting to kind of build to that a little bit too and starting to think about that. But that one's in its final edits, and yeah, we'll be ready in a few months.
Nice. Can you give some sort of split? Is it like more gory horror, or is it like
No,
cryptid?
it's a ghost story, and it's more
Okay.
psychological horror. I don't do gory. I don't have any interest in that. It's not my thing. But no, so it's about a kid who, I said all my story ideas come from nightmares that I had. This book came from a nightmare, and it was a nightmare about a nightmare. So even layers on layers. So I had a nightmare one night, and I woke up and was like, "Whoa, what was that?" So I decided to give character in my book this nightmare, and this kid's a painter, and he's kind of a prodigy as a painter, and he has a nightmare one night, horrible nightmare where he's hiding and he sees his parents, his whole family murdered while he's hiding. And when he wakes up, he is colorblind. And he has the same nightmare every night and only that same nightmare every night for 5 years. It's his whole world is this nightmare. And he stopped believing that it's a nightmare. He's now of the belief that it's a vision. And he now knows how his family is going to die and he has to figure out how to stop it.
Wow.
And that's the basic premise there.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna have to get on the wait list for that one.
Yeah.
Well, and I got to read is that your first book, Isaac in the Sky?
Yeah, the first one, first published
First
one.
one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
second one, this will be the second one. Yeah.
Awesome. And those psychological thrillers, man, those stick with people too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's something you
That's
ruminate
my,
on.
yeah. I want people thinking about it. Also, I want people debating it. Yeah. Well,
Mm.
like horror is kind of black and white. Like it
Mm.
happened and that's what it looks like. Psychological, scary stories on that level, I feel like they've raised more questions and readers can, it's a little more choose your own adventure to the reader. Oh, I wouldn't have gone that way, or I wouldn't have gone this
Mm.
way, or I'm not sure why he feels that way or thinks this way. And I think it raises more questions, and I like that. I like it when readers have questions about what I write, not that they just accept every aspect of it. I want them to, like, I wouldn't have done that. So, okay, cool. Well, why? Tell me why. I
Yeah.
want to know.
Very cool. Well, where can people find you?
Yeah, so online you can find my website, authormarkbenson.com, author, MarkBenson.com. You'll find stuff about Isaac, and you'll find stuff about my new book on there as well, a little teaser trailer and things like that. And my NASA stuff you'll find on the website as well. On Instagram, I'm on there as Wayside Writer. And I put most things on there. And if you go on Facebook and you look for Mark Benson, Solar System Ambassador, you'll find my NASA Facebook page there.
Very good. And I'll be sure to tag your website in the description of the show so our listeners can hop right on over. And before we go, what is one tip that you have for someone that would like to reconnect with nature?
I think that it's good to find things. If people are trying to reconnect with nature, I don't think it has to be something super grand. I don't think you have to say, well, then I need a cross-country road trip to Yosemite, or I need to fly somewhere and do a week in the woods camping. I think finding a forest preserve near your town, or a really nice park near your town, and just laying out there at night and looking at the stars, something like that simple, is the best way. Find something that's repeatable. Find something you can do again and again if you like it, and build. It doesn't have to be some grand gesture. Find a simple little way to go outside. It's one of the things I tell people when I was at the planetarium, that when you go to a natural history museum or an aquarium or an art museum, all the magic is inside, and you maybe get a souvenir and you take that home with you. But when you go to a planetarium, the magic actually starts when you leave, because you get to take the sky home with you. So it's actually training you for an adventure. A planetarium trains you for an adventure. It isn't the adventure itself. So the sky is above you forever. Yeah.
That's a good way to think of it. Thank you so much, Mark.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And until next time, unplug, get outside, and see what develops.
Wildly Unplugged podcast is a production of Wild Development Studio. The views, opinions, and statements expressed by individuals during Wild Development Studio's productions do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Wild Development Studio or its affiliates. Participation in any activities, expeditions, or adventures discussed or promoted during our content may involve inherent risks. It is strongly advised that individuals conduct thorough research, seek professional guidance, and take all necessary precautions before engaging in such activities or venturing into wilderness areas. Wild Development Studio, its representatives, or employees shall not be held responsible for any injury, loss, damage, accident, or unforeseen incident that may occur as a result of participating in activities inspired by or discussed in our content. By choosing to engage with our content or act upon any information provided, individuals do so at their own risk and discretion.